She really said it, raised her glass, looked right at me, and toasted to being an only child. 30 relatives froze. I stared at my plate, my hands trembling, cheeks on fire. But then I heard her whispering with her husband in Dad's office. "We'll finalize the estate before New Year's." Finalize, as in erase me, for good. That's when I knew the toast wasn't a joke. It was a warning. She wanted everything. The house, the land, even our parents' trust. But I didn't flinch, because I stood up too, with something she didn't know I had. And when I made my announcement, no one laughed. My name is Laura Bennett, and I'm 45 years old. I live 10 minutes from my parents' Pennsylvania farm, splitting my days between bookkeeping work and managing their care. My younger sister Michelle escaped to Philadelphia years ago, leaving me to handle our aging parents, Eleanor and Frank Bennett, while she dazzles corporate boardrooms. Each evening, I sort medications into pillboxes, my fingertips stained with ink from reconciling farm accounts, while the Southfield's sweet hay scent drifts through the screened porch. The timer chimes echo through the house as regularly as Michelle's praise once did, though she rarely visits now. But I have my own quiet power. 20 years of meticulously kept records, every bank statement filed, every number burning bright in my memory. Mother always said I had a head for figures. It's the rest of the family who forgot to count. But let me start from the beginning. You know how some memories hit you like a physical blow? That Thanksgiving was one of those moments. The farmhouse was packed wall to wall with relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, and their kids all squeezed around 3 tables we'd pushed together in the dining room. The good. China sparkled under Mom's antique chandelier, and everywhere you looked, food crowded the surfaces. Golden turkey, marshmallow-topped sweet potatoes, Mom's famous cornbread stuffing. I'd spent the morning helping Mom in the kitchen, just like always. The whole place smelled like heaven. Sage from the turkey, butter melting into hot rolls, and cinnamon from 5 different pies competing for attention. Even now, years later, those smells take me right back to that moment before everything changed. Michelle swept in around noon, fashionably late as usual, with her husband Tom and their designer clothes that probably cost more than a month of Mom's medications. But I bit my tongue and kept passing dishes, playing my part in our annual family theater. The meal was going fine, great even, until Michelle stood up, that crystal wine glass Dad saved for special occasions catching the light in her manicured hand. The room quieted down, everyone expecting one of her usual charming toasts. She smiled that TV-perfect smile of hers and said, "I'd like to propose a toast to being an only child. Have you ever felt a room shift? Like all the air gets sucked out at once?" My fork hit the plate with a crack that seemed to echo forever. I stared at my cranberry sauce, the sweetness turning bitter in my mouth, while 30 pairs of eyes swung between Michelle and me like some horrible tennis match. Mom tried to save it, of course. She forced this tight little smile that made her look 10 years older. Dad just coughed into his napkin, his go-to move when things get uncomfortable. I made myself look up, catalog the damage. Aunt Sarah's pitying glance, Cousin Pete trying not to grin. Little Emma looking confused, tugging at her mother's sleeve to ask a question nobody wanted to answer. Michelle just stood there, soaking it in. Tom gave her that slight nod he does when she scored a point, like this was all some game they'd planned. And maybe it was. I'd learn that later. The conversation stumbled back to life. Someone asked about the stuffing recipe. Another cousin started talking about their kid's soccer tournament. But everything felt wrong, like we were all reading from a script nobody believed in anymore. I kept my hands, busy stacking plates that didn't need stacking, offering coffee just to have something to do besides cry. My throat felt like I'd swallowed sand, but I wouldn't give Michelle the satisfaction of seeing tears. The crowd drifted toward the parlor after dessert, Michelle's laugh floating back like expensive perfume, the kind she always wore too much of. I needed air. The porch was dark except for that old light Dad installed when I was 12. It buzzed overhead like it was trying to tell me something, watching while I gripped the railing and tried to steady my breathing. Inside, I heard the parlor door open. Then Michelle's voice, lower now, coming from the direction of Dad's office. She was talking to Tom, their words just quiet enough that I couldn't make them out. But something in that secretive tone made my skin prickle. I stood there in the November chill, that stupid porch light, still humming its one-note song, and listened to my sister, plotting in the shadows. Act Y, Chapter 1, continued. My feet moved on their own, carrying me closer to Dad's office. The door stood barely open, just enough for Michelle's whispers to slip through like smoke. I pressed myself against the wall, heart thumping so loud I worried they'd hear it. "We'll finalize the estate papers before New Year's," Michelle was saying, her voice thick with that honey-sweet tone she used when pieces were falling into place. "It's all arranged." Tom's reply came lower, more businesslike. "Better be quick about it. Trust divides at the turn of the year if there are any loose ends." He paused, and I could picture him checking his fancy watch, the one he always made sure everyone noticed. "Clock's ticking." You ever have one of those moments where scattered puzzle pieces suddenly snap together? That's what happened in my head right then. The calendar math hit me like a splash of cold water. 30-something days. That's all I had to protect everything. The farm, Mom and Dad's security, my place in the family. All of it hanging by a thread that would snap when the ball dropped on New Year's Eve. I forced myself to breathe slow and quiet, like when I'm balancing the books and need to focus. Made my way back to the kitchen where dirty plates waited in towers on the counter. Started stacking them with hands that wanted to shake but couldn't afford to. Not now. Every clink of china against china helped me count backward from December 31st. "Laura?" Mom's voice drifted in from the dining room. "Would you put the kettle on, dear? My nerves could use some chamomile." "Of course, Mom." Amazing how steady I kept my voice. "And don't worry, I'll run tomorrow's checks first thing. The property tax and your prescriptions are all set." Dad appeared in the doorway, glancing toward his office with that worried look he gets when paperwork's involved. I've seen that look more often lately, now that I think about it. "Everything's fine, Dad," I said. But right then, the kettle let out this awful shriek that made us both jump. Felt a little too on the nose, if you ask me. The house finally emptied around 11. Michelle left with a fey kiss on Mom's cheek and another one of those smirks thrown my way. I waited until Mom and Dad's bedroom light clicked off, until the old farmhouse settled into its nighttime creaks and sighs. The office door opened silent as always. I'd oiled those hinges myself last spring. Moonlight spilled through the window, catching on the filing cabinet where we kept all the important papers. Family trust documents, property deeds, bank statements, 30 years of my careful record-keeping. First thing I noticed was the folders, slightly out of alignment. Michelle never could put things back exactly right. I pulled out my legal pad, the yellow one I use for serious business, and wrote at the top, "Countdown, divide at New Year." Under that, I started listing everything that needed checking, protecting, watching. The desk lamp cast weird shadows when I clicked it off. I folded the list small and tucked it in my pocket, right next to my heart, where it would remind me what was at stake. Tomorrow I'd smile over coffee, ask about Michelle's kids, play the dutiful daughter role I'd perfected over the years. But my eyes would track every paper that moved, every file that opened, every whispered phone call. Funny thing about looking after account books all these years. You learn that numbers don't lie, even when people do. And Michelle might be good at charming a crowd, but I'm good at following paper trails. We'd see which skill mattered more when the clock struck midnight on December 31st. I set my alarm early. Dawn would bring its own challenges, and I needed to be ready. Ready to smile. Ready to watch. Ready to protect what mattered, one careful step at a time. I was up before sunrise, mixing pancake batter by the glow of the range hood light. You know that hollow feeling when you're running on maybe 3 hours of sleep, but your mind won't stop spinning? That was me, mechanically measuring flour while replaying every whispered word I'd overheard. The kitchen filled with warm butter smell just as Michelle breezed in, designer handbag swinging. "Something smells divine," she wrapped Mom in a careful hug. How are you feeling? You look so resilient today. I flipped another pancake, watching Mom's face soften under the attention. Amazing how Michelle could make ordinary words sound like poetry when she wanted to. Let me help with those dishes, Michelle announced, rolling up her sleeves with theatrical care. Laura shouldn't have to do everything. She shot me that smile, the one that looked sweet unless you knew better. Though she is so good at these homey little tasks. Dad wandered in, brightening when Michelle rushed to adjust his sweater collar. There's my handsome father. Did you take your morning pills? I can handle his medication, I said, sliding a plate across the counter. Been doing it for 3 years now. Oh, I know you try. Michelle's laugh tinkled like expensive wind chimes. Speaking of trying, Aunt Lila, did you hear Laura never wanted children? Just couldn't see herself as a mother. She patted my arm. But that's worked out, hasn't it? Leaves you free for all this. The pancake I was flipping landed crooked. I smoothed it with my spatula, pressing down maybe harder than necessary. You'd think after 45 years I'd be immune to her little digs. You'd be wrong. Over the next few hours, I watched Michelle work the room like a politician. She'd arrived bearing artisanal pastries from that fancy bakery in town, the one that tied everything with gold ribbon. But she left with something more valuable. Changed. Stories. Remember when Michelle drove 3 hours to get Mom's special arthritis cream? Aunt Lila cooed over coffee. Funny, I thought, since I'm the one who orders Mom's prescriptions every month. And she's so good with the banking, Uncle Jim added. Really understands finances. I bit my tongue. 15 years of balanced checkbooks apparently counted less than Michelle's MBA she loved mentioning. The worst part? Watching Mom and Dad nod, along, their memories reshaping like wet clay under Michelle's careful hands. Mom seemed extra tired today, her responses slower. Dad's pillbox had pills in wrong compartments, something I'd never let happen on my watch. Around 3, sunlight slanted across the office rug in long amber strips. Michelle perched on Dad's desk, all concern and competence. We really should organize these files, she said, tapping a folder. Prevent any mistakes. Her eyes flickered to me. Adult daughters need to step into roles that fit their gifts. Some of us are meant for bigger things, while others, she trailed off, letting the silence fill in the blanks. That's when I made my decision. Opening my laptop, I created a new spreadsheet, something I should have done years ago. Column headers, date, time, who said what, which papers moved, where to, who signed what. The afternoon crawled by in a blur of Michelle's voice drifting from room to room, weaving her web of compliments and corrections. By evening, she'd rewritten half our family history without breaking a sweat. I was washing dinner dishes when I noticed the office door standing ajar again. The sight of it hit different now, less like carelessness, more like strategy. Everything looked different once you started keeping score. Late that evening, after the last coffee mug was dried and Mom had settled in with her crossword, I slipped into the office. The desk lamp cast yellow pools across the worn leather chairs, the ones Dad insisted on keeping from his accountant days. Remember those old-school office setups? The kind where everything had its place and you could find any file just by muscle memory? Well, that system was officially shot. I pulled open the bottom drawer, the one that always stuck unless you lifted while pulling. The familiar manila folders stood like soldiers, but something was off. Running my fingers along the tabs, I counted backward from Z. The newest will copy. Gone. November's investment statements. Missing. And the deed folder felt wrong, too light in my hands, like a half-empty sandwich. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to breathe slow and steady. Years of bookkeeping had taught me one thing. When numbers don't add up, you document everything. I grabbed my phone and snapped photos of every label, every gap where papers should have been. The serial numbers from the remaining documents went into my notes app, along with dates and times. In the empty will slot, I slipped a blank sheet marked with today's date. My own little tripwire. Working late? Michelle's voice dripped honey from the doorway. She didn't bother pretending to be surprised, just leaned against the frame in that casual way she practiced in college theater. "Looking for some missing files," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "The updated will copy. Couple of bank statements. You wouldn't know where those went, would you?" She laughed. That practiced, tinkling sound that always set my teeth on edge. "Oh, honey, paperwork is for responsible people." Her eyebrow lifted like she was daring me to react, like we were kids again and she'd just stolen my diary. "Those documents need to stay in the office, Michelle. Relax," she waved her hand. "I'm just putting together a clean binder. You know how forgetful folks can get at their age." The way she emphasized their age made my stomach turn. Dad's shuffling steps in the hallway caught our attention. He appeared in the doorway, reading glasses perched on his nose. "Everything all right in here?" Heard voices. Before I could answer, Michelle glided over and squeezed his arm. "Just sister stuff, Daddy. Laura's fussing about some old papers, but I've got it all organized. Why don't you let me walk you back to your chair? That history show you like is about to start." I watched them go, Dad already forgetting why he'd come as Michelle steered him away with practiced ease. Standing there in the quiet office, something shifted inside me. That familiar urge to confront, to demand answers, to finally call her out. It drained away like water down a sink, because I finally saw it clear as day. Confrontation was Michelle's game. She'd twist my words, play victim, and somehow end up looking even better in Mom and Dad's eyes. But evidence, cold, hard proof, that was my territory. I pulled up my phone's calendar and started logging everything: dates, times, which documents vanished when. Set a reminder labeled clock for every evening at 8. Then I shut down the computer, locked the desk, checking twice, and headed for the porch. The December air bit at my cheeks, but I stayed put, letting the steady buzz of that old porch light calm my racing thoughts. Mom had the electrician replace every bulb in the house last spring, but this one she kept. Said its hum reminded her of summer nights when we were kids. My phone buzzed. A text from Cousin Sarah. She was out of line. The toast, the comments, all of it. I stared at those words for a long moment, typed back. I noticed. 2 simple words, but they felt like a door closing, or maybe opening. The house had gone quiet behind me, holiday dishes done, guests gone. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Morning hit different after a holiday explosion. Know what I mean? That weird quiet when all the guests are gone, but the air still feels thick with yesterday's drama. I settled at the kitchen table with my coffee and the household ledger, the big blue one I'd kept since Dad first taught me double-entry bookkeeping. The familiar rhythm of reconciling utilities usually calmed me, but today each number felt like a breadcrumb leading somewhere important. Right there between the electric bill and the pharmacy charges, I drew a new column, labeled it Anomalies in my neatest handwriting. Might look innocent enough to anyone passing by, but I knew better. This was my first real move in whatever game Michelle had started. "Laura," Mom called from the living room, "did we write down my new prescription schedule?" "Got it right here," I answered, grabbing the med chart I'd updated last night. Kept my voice steady, practical, all business. "And I've added your podiatrist appointment for Thursday." While I walked her through the week's logistics, my phone was quietly capturing everything else. File cabinet labels, envelope seals, even the edges of documents poking out of folders. Evidence doesn't have to be loud to be damning. The doorbell chimed just before noon. Uncle Robert stood there, holding a casserole dish of leftover turkey stew. But I noticed how his eyes, sharp from 30 years of accounting, swept across Dad's desk in the corner. "Thought you might need lunch," he said. But the way he emphasized need told me he hadn't come just for a social call. Uncle Robert had always been the quiet one at family gatherings, watching while Michelle commanded the spotlight. I helped him settle at the kitchen table, then took a breath. "Actually, Uncle Robert, I could use some budget coaching if you have time. Just want to make sure I'm tracking everything properly." He nodded slowly, understanding flowing between us. We both knew this wasn't really about budgets, but the pretense protected everyone's dignity. "Show me what you've got," he said, pulling out his reading glasses. Over bowls of steaming stew, Uncle Robert taught me things they don't cover in basic bookkeeping. How to get read-only access to bank portals without alerting primary users. The art of exporting transaction data to spreadsheets that tell stories numbers won't reveal on their own. "You won." "No," he said between bites. "I always respected how you handled the books here. Long before Michelle started." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. "Patterns sing when you graph them," he added, tapping his spoon against the bowl for emphasis. That's when I started my checklist. Bank statements to quietly pull. Dates that felt suspicious. Signatures that needed comparing. The afternoon light was fading when Mom shuffled off for her. Dad had already dozed off in his recliner, game show murmuring in the background. Uncle Robert and I worked out our rhythm. Sundays for deep dives into the data, weekdays for gathering what we could without raising flags. I turned off my phone's reminder alarms. Didn't need them anymore. The adrenaline from yesterday's shock was giving way to something cooler, more focused. A plan. The porch light clicked on automatically as dusk settled in. Uncle Robert showed me how to initiate my first data download, his steady hands guiding mine through the keystrokes. "Remember," he whispered, "slow and steady wins this race." The computer hummed, numbers flowing onto my screen like water finding its level. Everything Michelle thought she'd hidden was about to rise to the surface, one transaction at a time. By Wednesday afternoon, Uncle Robert and I had commandeered Mom's quilting table, spreading out receipt books and bank statements like we were piecing together our own kind of pattern. My fingers were stained with red ink from circling numbers that didn't add up. And believe me, there were plenty. "Look at this," I said, tapping a fuel receipt from last month. Dad's truck needed gas 3 times in one day, but he hadn't left the farm. My stomach churned as I matched it against a bank withdrawal. Someone's using their emergency card. Uncle Robert adjusted his glasses, squinting at the statement. "And here, 4 prescription refills in 2 weeks, but Eleanor's medicine schedule shows nothing due." He had this way of keeping his voice steady, like each discovery was just another day at the office. You know that feeling when puzzle pieces start clicking together, but you wish they didn't? That's how it felt watching Uncle Robert trace 2 big transfers through, some LLC I'd never heard of. He pulled up the state business registry on his tablet, and there it was. Same address as my brother-in-law's consulting firm. "Numbers don't lie, Laura," Uncle Robert said quietly, patting my hand. "They don't spread rumors or play favorites, they just tell it straight." I pressed my palms flat against the table, steadying myself. The proof was right there in black and white. Well, black and red now, with all our circles. Michelle might be good at working a room, but she couldn't charm her way past a bank statement. We spent hours building what Uncle Robert called our truth binder. Bank summaries, screenshots with those little date stamps in the corner, even a glossary translating banker speak into plain English. Mom and Dad deserved to understand exactly what was happening to their money, no fancy terms to hide behind. "Remember when your dad taught? You bookkeeping?" Uncle Robert asked while we worked. The memory hit me hard. Sitting at this same table, Dad showing me how to balance his checkbook, telling me numbers were just another way of keeping promises. I made 2 copies of everything, sealed them in thick manila envelopes. "These stay at my house," Uncle Robert said firmly. "Better safe than sorry." Each new discovery felt like a gut punch, but it also made me more certain. Michelle couldn't erase me if I had proof. Still, I practiced what I'd say when the time came. "Mom, Dad, we need to review some unusual transactions. Calm, professional, let the numbers do the shouting." Friday evening, I ran to the copy shop for more supplies. Walking back into the office, something felt off. There it was, a yellow sticky note stuck right on the computer screen. "Security upgrade. Ask Michelle." My hand shook a little as I snapped a photo of the note. Deep breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth, just like Mom taught us during thunderstorms. I pulled out the encrypted thumb drive I'd labeled Porch Light and started backing up every file. The old porch light hummed outside, same as it had every night of my life. Some things don't change, like numbers and truth, and the way family loyalty gets tested when money's involved. Uncle Robert texted while I was finishing the backup. "Sunday review still on?" "You bet," I typed back. "Might need to get creative with access, though. New security in place." The computer whirred, copying files. Each one felt like another brick in the wall of truth we were building. Michelle might have locked the front door, but I'd spent my whole life finding workarounds on this farm. Saturday would bring her new rules and my new solutions. Saturday hit like a tornado. I was still in my robe, coffee barely poured, when Michelle burst through the front door, waving glossy photos like lottery tickets. "Surprise!" Her voice had that sugar-coated edge that always meant trouble was gift-wrapped. "I've got the most wonderful solution for everyone." Mom was still in her morning sweater, the blue one with the loose thread she kept meaning to fix. Dad had his crossword puzzle half finished on the kitchen table. Just another quiet farm morning about to get upended. "The guest house is all ready," Michelle announced, spreading photos across Dad's puzzle. "You'll be so much safer there, especially with winter coming. No more worrying about these old stairs or that temperamental furnace." I watched Mom's face do that thing where she tries to hide concern behind politeness. "The roads get pretty bad out your way," she said softly. "Oh, but wait till you see the heated floors." Michelle gushed. "And I'll cook all your favorites. Remember my pot roast?" She winked at Dad, who'd always been weak for her cooking. Dad looked my way, and I saw 40 years of routine wrestling with the promise of comfort. "Laura handles all our appointments," he said, but his voice wavered. "What about Dr. Matthews?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral while my fingers pressed white marks into my coffee mug. "He's been managing Dad's heart meds for 15 years. Michelle waved her hand like she was shooing a fly. "There are excellent doctors closer to us. Look at this suite I've set up." She flashed more photos. Everything staged like a magazine spread, not a wrinkle or pill bottle in sight. You ever watch a sandcastle get taken apart one grain at a time? That's what the next few hours felt like. Michelle orchestrated everything with cheerful efficiency, directing the packing like a conductor. Mom's sweaters went into labeled boxes, Dad's books into neat stacks. I was loading what Michelle called just linens into my car, but underneath those soft, familiar quilts lay our evidence binder, safe between layers of childhood blankets. When I went to grab the spare office key from its hook by the back door, the one that had hung there since I was tall enough to reach it was gone. "Oh, I've already gathered all the important papers," Michelle chirped when I mentioned it. "Better to keep everything organized in one place, don't you think?" The guest house looked perfect on the surface, fresh paint smell mixing with whatever fancy air freshener Michelle had plugged in. But to me, it reeked of control. Every corner felt staged, every surface too clean, like a hotel room pretending to be home. "Now, just a few house rules," Michelle said, as she showed them around. Mom nodded along, looking smaller somehow. "We'll have your mail forwarded here, much less confusing that way. And I've set up a schedule for visitors to avoid tiring you out." I kept nodding, but my mind was mapping everything. Which doors had locks, where the Wi-Fi router sat, what times Michelle's husband usually worked late. Every detail might matter later. Before leaving, I checked Mom's pill timer while Michelle was showing Dad the smart thermostat. The familiar click-click of the compartments grounded me. "Sunday dinner at 6?" I whispered to Mom, watching her eyes brighten at the routine. "I'll bring that apple cake you like." "Lovely idea," Michelle's voice carried from the doorway, too loud, too bright. Family dinner in their new home. Perfect. Driving home, my hands cramped from gripping the steering wheel. Michelle wanted control? Fine. But she'd forgotten something crucial about me. I'd learned to handle farm books because I understood that numbers need witnesses. Whatever came next would need witnesses too. The sun was setting behind Michelle's perfect house as I pulled away. Time to make some calls. This showdown needed the right audience. Next morning, I pulled into Michelle's driveway with Mom's favorite chicken soup still warm in the crock pot. The kind she always made when any of us were sick or sad, though I doubt Michelle remembered that detail. You know how some memories only stick with the person doing the actual caring? I'd barely set the pot on the counter when Michelle's voice rang out from the living room. "Everyone, I have wonderful news." Mom and Dad were settled in their new spots, Dad in the leather armchair that probably cost more than our old tractor, Mom looking almost lost in that oversized recliner Michelle had picked out. Aunt Lila and 3 cousins I hadn't expected to see were perched on the sofa, all attention on Michelle. "We're having a special Christmas Eve signing party," Michelle announced, hands clasped like she was sharing news of a grandchild. "It's time to streamline all these scattered documents before the holidays. Get everything properly organized, you know?" The room erupted in approving murmurs. Aunt Lila nodded eagerly. "So practical, dear. Your mother won't have to worry about a thing." I watched Dad's shoulders relax, that familiar relief washing over him whenever someone else offered to handle paperwork. Mom just fiddled with her sweater sleeve, her fingers working that loose thread she never got around to fixing. "Keep it steady," I told myself. "Play it smart." "That's certainly thorough planning," I said, carefully spooning soup into Mom's favorite bowl, the one I'd brought from home, because I knew she'd miss it. "Should we have a list of what documents need signatures, so the witnesses are properly prepared?" Michelle's smile flickered just slightly. "If you hadn't spent 45 years studying her tells, you might have missed it." "Of course! I'll email everyone once the notary confirms. We want everything done properly." The soup steam curled up between us like a question mark. I waited until I was in my car before calling. "Robert." "December 24th, I said when he picked up. "She's making her move." "Christmas Eve?" His accountant's precision came through clear. Bold timing. Family audience, holiday pressure, emotional leverage. She's not subtle. "No, she's not." I pulled over to jot down the date in my planner. Time to finalize our exhibits. The next hours fell into a rhythm of preparation. I refined our documentation into clear sections, each tab color-coded and labeled in plain English. Robert helped me draft a 1-page summary in large, clear font for Mom, highlighting only the essential numbers she needed to understand. I practiced my opening statement in front of my bathroom mirror, timing it to 2 minutes exactly. No blame, no emotion, just facts. The bank records show consistent patterns. Pause. Breathe. These withdrawals correlate with... Keep it simple. Each day leading up to Christmas Eve, I maintained my routine. Brought food, sat with Mom, helped Dad with his crossword. But now I was also noting details. Which cousins received Michelle's party invitation, which neighbors were conspicuously left off the list. Every inclusion and omission told its own story. On December 23rd, I made my final preparations. The printer hummed as I ran off our last copies, each page crystal clear. One set went into a folder, another into the sleeve with my porch light thumb drive. Both tucked safely into my winter coat's inside pocket, right over my heart. That night, I stood on my porch and looked at the countdown I'd been keeping since Thanksgiving. One day remained. Across the fields, the old farmhouse's porch light cut through the darkness, steady as a heartbeat over fresh snow. The same light that had guided us home countless times now marked time like a metronome, counting down to tomorrow's truth. Mom's soup pot sat clean in my trunk, ready for another visit. Tomorrow, it would have plenty of company. Documents that spoke louder than whispers, numbers that couldn't be charmed away, and witnesses who'd see everything in broad daylight. I pulled into Michelle's circular driveway at 3 sharp, parking between Aunt Lila's SUV and Cousin Beth's minivan. The afternoon sun caught the Christmas wreath on Michelle's front door, making its gold ribbon wink like it knew a secret. My coat felt heavier than usual, the weight of that evidence folder pressing against my ribs with each step. The door opened before I could knock. "Laura." Perfect timing. Michelle's welcome was museum curator precise, ushering me into a living room that looked like it had been staged for a holiday magazine shoot. Pine garlands draped the mantel, Cinnamon-spiced cider steamed in a silver urn, and carols whispered from hidden speakers. You know that feeling when something's too perfect? That's what this was. A folding table dominated the room's center, its surface neat as a church altar with stacked documents and fancy pens laid out in perfect rows. I recognized the embossed ones, the kind Michelle always used when she wanted to make something feel important. Mom sat in her new recliner, hands fidgeting with her cardigan buttons. Those trembling fingers caught my eye, and I had to take a slow breath. Dad stood nearby, cracking jokes about lawyer handwriting that didn't quite mask the tension in his voice. Good thing we've got plenty of witnesses, he said, gesturing at our assembled relatives. Though I doubt Santa's signature counts as legal. I counted heads while hanging my coat. 6 cousins in their Christmas sweaters, Aunt Lila perched like a sentinel near Mom, Uncle Robert giving me a subtle nod from his corner spot. Michelle's husband lingered by the printer table, trying to look casual but watching everything. A woman I didn't recognize sat at the document table, unpacking a notary stamp and ledger from a professional-looking bag. I made my way over, extending my hand. Hi there. I'm Laura Bennett, one of the principals involved today. Patricia Meadows, she replied, showing me her notary ID without prompting. Good. She was thorough. Would you mind if we keep all signings in full view of the room? I asked, keeping my voice friendly but firm. Family records are so important to get right. Michelle's laugh cut across the room like wind chimes with an edge. Oh, Laura, always so formal. We're not at the bank, you know. She moved to the center of the room, champagne flute in hand, commanding attention like she'd done since we were kids, putting on backyard plays. Everyone, if I could have your eyes up front. Today isn't just about paperwork. It's about honoring love with clarity. While she launched into her speech, I tracked positions like Robert had taught me. Michelle's husband still by the printer, probably ready to run copies. Cousin Beth near the door, always quick to spread news. Uncle Robert had positioned himself perfectly to see both the document table and Mom's face. The weight of that folder pressed against my side, and suddenly I was grateful for all those nights practicing my own words in the mirror. Numbers don't need speeches. Numbers just need to be heard. So without further delay, Michelle concluded, let's begin with the most important piece. She turned to the notary. We have a power of attorney reaffirmation that needs witnessing. The notary reached for her stamp. If you'll present the document. Actually, I stepped forward, my voice steadier than my heartbeat. I think we should review the financial summaries first, so everyone has a clear understanding. The room shifted, Mom's hands stilled on her buttons. Dad's eyebrows lifted, Michelle's perfect smile strained at the edges. That's hardly necessary, she started, but I was already moving. I placed a sealed envelope on the table, its red string closure bright as a warning. Light. Aunt Lila leaned forward. Cousin Beth's phone disappeared into her pocket. Michelle's husband took one step away from the printer. The string made a soft snap when I broke it. I pulled out the first summary sheet. Clean, professional, with yellow highlights marking the withdrawals like breadcrumbs. My hands didn't shake anymore. When you've spent months preparing for a moment, your body knows exactly what to do. These are bank records from the past 6 months, I said, laying them on the table where everyone could see. I've highlighted transfers that don't match any household expenses. Michelle's perfect smile flickered. Oh, please, not your bookkeeping obsession again. But I kept going, my voice steady as a metronome. 3 separate withdrawals, each over $5,000, sent to an LLC registered at 1842 Pine Creek Road. I slid out the business registry document, which, as you can all see, is the same address as Tom's consulting company. Uncle Robert stepped up behind me, his accountant's precision giving weight to every word. October 12th, 5,800. He pointed to the first highlight. November 3rd, 6,200. November 28th, 7,400. You could hear the ice cubes settling in abandoned drinks. The carols felt obscene now, their cheer mocking the tension in the room. This is just accounting noise. Michelle waved her hand like she was shooing away flies. Business is complicated, Laura. You wouldn't understand. Tom, her husband, cleared his throat. It's temporary float between accounts, completely normal in estate planning. Interesting. I laid down the next piece of evidence, time-stamped screenshots showing the exact moments of transfer. Because these withdrawals align perfectly with Mom's pharmacy runs. Except there's no medication charges on the ledger for those dates. The notary's chair scraped back. She wasn't even trying to hide her frown as she took 2 steps away from the table. Dad leaned forward, his jaw so tight I could see the muscle jumping. The look in his eyes, I'd never seen it before. Not anger exactly, something deeper, something that knew it had been played for a fool. Laura. Mom's voice was barely a whisper, my name rising from her like a prayer she'd been holding back. I met her eyes, keeping my voice gentle but clear. These numbers describe money leaving your accounts without your knowledge. The room broke open. Cousin Beth's phone was already out, thumbs flying. Aunt Lila gasped loud enough to drown out the carols. Even the notary was reaching for her bag. Michelle lunged for the papers, but Uncle Robert's hand came down flat on the stack. I wouldn't, he said quietly. This is defamation. Tom's lawyer voice boomed through the room. On Christmas Eve, no less. You're going to regret this, Laura. But I wasn't listening to him. I was watching Mom, whose eyes hadn't left mine. I think, I said carefully, we should pause all signings until there's been a full review. The silence stretched. Mom's nod, when it came, was slow but certain. Dad looked straight at the notary. His voice carried the weight of every decimal point, every missing dollar, every smooth lie he'd been fed. Stop, he said. Just one word, but it landed like a gavel. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, the kind that makes your lungs ache when you breathe deep. I picked up Mom and Dad early, before Michelle's usual visiting hours. Uncle Robert met us at Davis & Sons' law office downtown, his leather briefcase bulging with our carefully organized evidence. You know those moments when everything feels both surreal and sharply focused? That's what it was like sitting in that wood-paneled conference room, watching Mr. Davis, Dad's attorney for 30 years, methodically work through our binder. His reading glasses caught the winter light as he turned each page, making little humming sounds that grew more concerned by the minute. Frank, Eleanor, he said finally, setting down the last statement. These transactions are serious irregularities. We need to take immediate action to protect your assets. Dad's hands were steady as he folded them on the table. Do what needs to be done, Jim. I watched Mr. Davis punch numbers into his desk phone, put it on speaker. The bank's fraud department picked up, and suddenly the room filled with terms like unauthorized transfers and immediate freeze. Uncle Robert quietly laid out the timeline we'd prepared, his accountant's precision making everything crystal clear. I should have listened to you sooner, Laura, Mom whispered, her hand finding mine under the table. The touch nearly broke me, not because of the validation, but because I could feel her trembling. Mr. Davis worked straight through lunch, drafting documents while making calls. By 2 o'clock, he had a stack of papers ready. These revoke Michelle's power of attorney, he explained, sliding them across the polished wood. And these reinstate the original trust division, equal shares, as you always intended. I've added a dual confirmation requirement for any future account changes. Mom signed first, her pen scratching quietly against paper. Dad followed, his signature as strong as ever. The notary's stamp echoed like a drumbeat. Thump, thump, thump. I'll draft letters to everyone who was present last night, Mr. Davis added, making it clear that any documents from the Christmas Eve meeting are null and void. The drive home felt like surfacing from deep water. Mom stared out the window at the winter fields, brown and sleeping under patches of snow. Dad hummed tunelessly in the back seat, something he hadn't done in months. I was heating up leftover stew when the first text from Michelle came through. My phone buzzed against the counter like an angry wasp, This is all a massive misinterpretation. You're turning them against me with creative accounting. Then, you've always been jealous of my success. And we need to talk this through as a family. I sent back one message. Please direct all communication to Mr. Davis at Davis & Sons Law Office. Then I muted notifications. The kitchen filled with the smell of rosemary and beef as I ladled stew into bowls. Mom actually smiled when I set hers down. A real smile, not the worried one I'd gotten used to seeing. After dinner, I updated the household ledger with our new safe deposit box access codes while Dad dozed in his armchair. The familiar rhythm of writing numbers felt like coming home. Mom sat at the kitchen table doing her crossword, just like always. My phone kept lighting up with messages from cousins. We should talk. Let us help mediate. Family shouldn't fight. Like this. I said it face down. Tomorrow would be soon enough for those conversations. The porch light clicked on automatically at dusk. I'd forgotten how early it got dark in December. I stepped outside, letting the winter air clear my head. The cold bit at my cheeks, but it felt clean somehow, like the first breath after a fever breaks. Standing there, watching my breath cloud in the purple twilight, I felt the weight of the last few months finally start to lift. Not gone completely. There would be aftershocks, I knew that, but lighter, manageable. Inside, I could hear Mom asking Dad if he wanted more stew. Normal sounds, safe sounds. You know how news spreads in small towns, faster than Christmas cookies disappear at a church social. The week after our legal meeting was like watching dominoes fall, one revelation tipping into the next. It started with Cousin Beth at the grocery store. She caught me between the produce and dairy, clutching her phone. "Laura, I found the LLC filings online," she whispered, showing me public records she'd pulled up. "They're registered right to Tom's office address. How long was this going on?" I kept my voice steady, the way I do when balancing complex ledgers. "The attorney has all the documentation. I'm trying to focus on Mom and Dad's care right now. But you can't stop people from talking, especially when they feel fooled." By Wednesday, Mrs. Patterson from the Chamber of Commerce cornered me at the post office. "Michelle always made such a fuss about those charity galas," she said, fiddling with her car keys. "Makes you wonder where all those donation-matching funds really went." I just nodded and pointed her to Mr. Davis's office. Let the facts speak for themselves. They're louder than any gossip. Tom, Michelle's husband, took the biggest hit at his consulting firm. One of Dad's old friends sat on a client's board, and suddenly there were compliance reviews and routine audits. By Friday, that client had quietly taken their business elsewhere. Funny how karma works sometimes, isn't it? The real shift was at church that Sunday. Michelle had always held court after services, surrounded by admirers. This time, she sat alone in the back pew while Eleanor and Frank received gentle handshakes and worried smiles. Her designer dress looked out of place now, like costume jewelry trying to pass for real gold. "Your sister seemed different today," Mom said on the drive home. "Less sparkly." I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Sometimes truth dims artificial light. 2 weeks passed like that. Quiet revelations spreading through town like ripples in still water. I kept my head down and focused on what mattered. Updating medication charts, reconciling the restored accounts, making sure Dad understood each piece of mail that crossed his desk. The January evening I changed the porch light bulb felt symbolic somehow. Remember how that old fixture used to buzz and flicker? Now it shone steady and true, casting warm gold across the fresh snow. I stepped back to admire my handiwork, breathing in air that smelled like winter and rightness. Through the kitchen window, I could hear Mom humming, something she hadn't done in months. The soft shuffle of papers told me Dad was at the table, probably organizing his mail with the new filing system we'd worked out together. No more missing statements or mysterious transfers, just honest numbers telling their straight stories. I set my ledger down on the little porch table, the same one where I used to do homework while Mom baked, back when Michelle was too busy with cheerleading to help with chores. The leather cover gleamed in the new light, and I ran my fingers over the embossed date. This year's records would tell a different story, one of restoration, not theft. From what I heard, Michelle spent most days at home now. Her social media went quiet. Her charity board positions mysteriously opened up. The family trust was secure, split exactly as our parents had always intended. Mr. Davis made sure every T was crossed, every I dotted. Standing there on the porch, watching that steady light spill across generations of footprints in the snow, I felt the weight of our family legacy settle back where it belonged. I touched the porch railing, the one Dad and Grandpa had installed together 30 years ago, and looked at the warm doorway where Mom still hummed her quiet tune. The words came naturally then, rising like truth. In ledger lines, family loyalty outshines greed.